Glass shattered under my weight before I even hit the floor, and for a second, the whole world froze in horror. Pain shot through my legs like fire, but nothing burned more than Cassie's manic eyes staring down at me. Her voice cut through the party chatter like a whip. "Quit faking for attention, Sable." Every guest froze, some gasping, others frozen in awkward disbelief. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share. Your support keeps the stories coming. I could not move. My wheelchair lay toppled beside me, crushed under the chaos of falling champagne towers. Laughter from the crowd twisted into a sharp edge of humiliation, each chuckle and whisper carving into me like a knife. I had come hoping to smile, to be part of my sister's perfect day, but perfection was never mine to touch. Cassie thrived on control, and I was her favorite toy to torment. Dr. Helena Kingsley appeared almost instantly, her hands steady, her eyes cutting through the panic. "This is assault," she said firmly, ignoring Cassie's frantic protests. It felt surreal. Someone finally saw the truth I had carried alone for years. Whispers spread across the room. Did she? And I thought she was faking. Their disbelief was electric, yet I felt a flicker of vindication. Cassie tried to laugh it off, brushing champagne-soaked hair from her face, but the videos and photos circulating on guests' phones betrayed her. I remembered every cruel remark, every shove, every "you are useless" masked as a joke. All the years of hiding, of enduring family lies about my accident, surged to the surface, and then it hit me. I was not just Sable, the sister in a wheelchair. I was a storm they had underestimated. I gritted my teeth as paramedics lifted me, each motion a reminder of my helplessness, but also of the truth hidden in my silence. This party, meant to celebrate Cassie, had become the stage where the truth began its slow, unstoppable march. I would not scream, I would not beg, I would wait, I would watch, and they had no idea what was coming. The ambulance doors slammed behind me and the world shrank to the sterile, cold lights of the hospital. Every jolt of movement was agony, but my mind refused to obey my body's despair. Cassie's face hovered in my memory, twisted in rage and disbelief that her favorite victim, the one she thought she had completely broken, was still breathing, still alive. I hated her, yes, but deeper than that, I felt a cold, simmering clarity. Everything she thought she had hidden, the lies, the blame, the control, was now exposed to the light. Nurses moved around me like silent shadows, checking vitals, murmuring questions I barely heard. Every touch was a reminder. My body betrayed me, but my mind did not. I could still plan, still see the strings behind my family's cruel puppetry. My parents, who had always smiled as Cassie's perfection overshadowed me, were nowhere to be seen. They were careful, deliberate, silent, perhaps hoping the spectacle would end here, in a hospital room, with the world's judgment buried in whispers. Dr. Helena Kingsley stayed close, her presence a lighthouse in this storm. She would not leave my side, insisting on documenting everything, from my injuries to the testimony of witnesses. "You were assaulted, Sable. This was no accident," she said firmly, ignoring Cassie's frantic protests. It felt surreal. Someone finally saw the truth I had carried alone for years. Whispers spread across the room. Did she? And I thought she was faking. Their disbelief was electric, yet I felt a flicker of vindication. Cassie tried to laugh it off, brushing champagne-soaked hair from her face, but the videos and photos circulating on guests' phones betrayed her. I remembered every cruel remark, every shove, every "you are useless" masked as a joke. All the years of hiding, of enduring family lies about my accident, surged to the surface, and then it hit me. I was not just Sable, the sister in a wheelchair. I was a storm they had underestimated. I gritted my teeth as paramedics lifted me, each motion a reminder of my helplessness, but also of the truth hidden in my silence. This party, meant to celebrate Cassie, had become the stage where the truth began its slow, unstoppable march. I would not scream, I would not beg, I would wait, I would watch, and they had no idea what was coming. The ambulance doors slammed behind me and the world shrank to the sterile, cold lights of the hospital. Every jolt of movement was agony, but my mind refused to obey my body's despair. Cassie's face hovered in my memory, twisted in rage and disbelief that her favorite victim, the one she thought she had completely broken, was still breathing, still alive. I hated her, yes, but deeper than that, I felt a cold, simmering clarity. Everything she thought she had hidden, the lies, the blame, the control, was now exposed to the light. Nurses moved around me like silent shadows, checking vitals, murmuring questions I barely heard. Every touch was a reminder. My body betrayed me, but my mind did not. I could still plan, still see the strings behind my family's cruel puppetry. My parents, who had always smiled as Cassie's perfection overshadowed me, were nowhere to be seen. They were careful, deliberate, silent, perhaps hoping the spectacle would end here, in a hospital room, with the world's judgment buried in whispers. Dr. Helena Kingsley stayed close, her presence a lighthouse in this storm. She would not leave my side, insisting on documenting everything, from my injuries to the testimony of witnesses. "You were assaulted, Sable. This was no accident," she said firmly, ignoring Cassie's frantic protests. It felt surreal. Someone finally saw the truth I had carried alone for years. Whispers spread across the room. Did she? And I thought she was faking. Their disbelief was electric, yet I felt a flicker of vindication. Cassie tried to laugh it off, brushing champagne-soaked hair from her face, but the videos and photos circulating on guests' phones betrayed her. I remembered every cruel remark, every shove, every "you are useless" masked as a joke. All the years of hiding, of enduring family lies about my accident, surged to the surface, and then it hit me. I was not just Sable, the sister in a wheelchair. I was a storm they had underestimated. In my room, the world felt distant, but my mind was alive with strategy. I thought back to the car accident, the one that had left me paralyzed. For years, I had been told it was my own fault. My parents' voices echoed, "You have to take responsibility, Sable. It was an accident." Lies. Cassie had caused it. She had been reckless, selfish, and her actions destroyed my life. I had carried the burden alone, silently, as everyone else smiled, shook their heads, and allowed her to flourish. But now the chain of lies was cracking, and I could feel its links weakening. Helena spoke softly, her words cutting through my reverie. "Sable, you have rights. You are not powerless, not anymore." I closed my eyes, imagining the first steps of reclaiming my life. I imagined confronting Cassie, not in anger, but in truth. The humiliation she had planned for me, years of sneers, silent cruelty, public embarrassment, was reversing. I was not the victim she expected. I was the storm she could not see coming. By the time the scans were done, the room was filled with legal advisors, detectives, and the lingering presence of shocked family members. My parents' faces betrayed the first hints of panic. For years, they had protected Cassie, upheld her lies, and convinced me to bear the weight of the truth. Now, the balance was shifting. They no longer controlled the narrative. I did. Then came the first revelation. A nurse had found a hidden recording accidentally left by a guest on their phone. It showed Cassie's hands gripping my wheelchair the moment she shoved me, the exact angle of my fall into the champagne tower. The evidence was precise, undeniable, damning. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering, not from fear, but from the first taste of long-awaited justice. Cassie had overplayed, underestimated me, and now the law, the public, and even our own family could not ignore it. But as the adrenaline settled, I realized something more terrifying. This was only the beginning. The exposure of the attack was immediate, but the years of hidden truth, the car accident, the lies, the emotional abuse had yet to surface. I would need patience, cunning, and careful planning. The fight for full accountability, for the restitution I deserved, would not be fast and it would not be easy. Every step would be watched, every word measured, every move anticipated by those desperate to protect themselves. Even so, a fire had been lit. In that sterile hospital room, as pain and indignity coexisted, I began to see my path. Cassie had thought she controlled me, and for a moment she had almost succeeded. But now she was exposed, vulnerable, trembling under the weight of consequences she had never imagined. And I, silent, underestimated, ignored for too long, was ready to reclaim everything. My body was battered, yes, but my mind was sharper than ever. Helena handed me a cup of water, and her gaze met mine. The real work starts now. Are you ready? I nodded, feeling a surge of determination I had never allowed myself before. This was not about revenge for the fall or even the humiliation. It was about truth, about justice, about the freedom that had been denied to me for decades. And for the first time in my life, I knew it was possible. But as I lay there, watching the room buzz with activity, a shadow of doubt crept in. My parents would not go down easily. Cassie had resources, allies, and a dangerous sense of entitlement, and there was one question that would haunt me through the next days. Would exposing them fully break my life open, or would it push me into an even deeper trap? I clenched my fists, feeling the weight of paralysis and resolve coexisting in a strange balance. The public humiliation had only begun, but I could already feel the tide turning. And as I drifted into a restless, pain-filled sleep, one thought burned brighter than the fear, the anger, or the sorrow. This family had underestimated Sable for the last time. Weeks passed like jagged glass against my nerves. Hospital walls had been replaced with the quiet tension of home surveillance, lawyer meetings, and whispered conversations I could barely hear but never missed. Cassie's public facade had started to crack. She smiled at parties, waved at acquaintances, pretended normalcy, but I could see the tremor in her voice when my name was mentioned, the way her hands lingered over her phone, double-checking messages. The woman who had shoved me into a champagne tower, who had hidden the truth of my accident for years, was suddenly afraid. I learned patience during those days. While the world thought I was recovering, I was collecting, cataloging, preparing. Every lie Cassie had told, every misstep my parents had hidden, every witness who had quietly seen the truth, I had them. I had proof, and I had the silent satisfaction of knowing that my tormentors were underestimating me, as they always had. They thought paralysis meant weakness, but in silence I was stronger than they could imagine. Then came the day the restitution papers arrived. My parents, finally forced by mounting legal pressure, offered a settlement far larger than I could have imagined. Money alone could not erase the years of betrayal, but it was symbolic, a recognition of the harm done, a ticket to freedom. I stared at the document, my hand shaking with emotion, the smallest spark of joy igniting in my chest. After decades of being controlled, silenced, and humiliated, the universe seemed to whisper that my patience had been worth everything. Cassie's reaction was everything I had predicted. She sat in the lawyer's office, pale, shaking, her words stumbling over themselves. "It is not fair. She could not finish. There were no words left to defend the indefensible. All her carefully cultivated superiority, all her manipulation, all the laughter she had poured over me like acid had evaporated under the weight of undeniable truth. I could almost feel her disbelief radiate across the table like heat from a furnace. Even as restitution marked the beginning of my practical victory, the emotional triumph was deeper, richer. I cut ties with the family that hurt me, quietly but decisively. Every phone number deleted, every message left unread, every invitation ignored was a brick in the wall I built between my past and my future. Freedom was more intoxicating than revenge, and I finally understood that. The power I had been denied for years was mine, not because of money, not because of legal victories, but because I refused to let their cruelty define my life any longer. Medical recovery began in small, stubborn increments. Every step in physical therapy, every muscle relearned, every therapy session was a tiny rebellion against the accident Cassie had caused. I did not expect a miracle, but I did expect progress, and that was enough. Each achievement, no matter how minor, was a reminder. My body was assaulted, but my spirit was not. My control over my own destiny was growing day by day, hour by hour. The party, the attack, the humiliation, it all felt like a distant nightmare now. But nightmares linger in the shadows, and I knew Cassie had not forgotten the embarrassment. She had underestimated me, always, and that underestimation had been her undoing. I could almost hear her silent rage bottled behind polite conversation and forced smiles. That rage was evidence that I had won far more than a legal settlement. I had claimed power over my own story. There were days I allowed myself to cry, to grieve for the lost years, the stolen independence, and the trauma hidden behind polite smiles. But even in grief, I felt the pulse of resilience. I had survived the impossible, betrayal, paralysis, public humiliation, and a lifetime of lies, and I had emerged not broken, but sharpened, alive with clarity and purpose. Then, one evening, as I watched the sunset from my small balcony, my phone buzzed with a video message from one of Cassie's former allies, someone who had seen the truth but feared speaking out. The message was simple, almost chilling. "She is panicking. You have control now. Do not stop." My heart raced, but it was not fear, it was satisfaction. Every calculated step, every hidden effort, every quiet strategy had led to this moment. I realized in that golden light that victory was not just about legal papers or financial restitution. It was about reclaiming my life from those who tried to define it. Freedom was sweeter than revenge, and every day I could breathe, move, and plan my future on my terms was proof that I had won. Cassie once mocked me for needing help. Now she had no power over me at all. Friends and strangers alike began to see the transformation. Social media posts, messages of support, and whispers of admiration reminded me that my story resonated far beyond our family walls. I was no longer just Sable, the sister in the wheelchair. I was a survivor, a strategist, a quiet force of resilience who had been underestimated and then unleashed. Every laugh Cassie aimed at me had fueled a fire she could never extinguish. The final revelation came quietly, almost like a whisper from the past. The accident, once blamed on me, was conclusively tied to Cassie's recklessness. Medical reports, eyewitness accounts, and years of hidden evidence coalesced into undeniable truth. My parents had no choice but to concede publicly. The silence that had been demanded of me for decades was shattered, and I could finally speak without fear. The world knew what they tried to hide, and I could move forward unshackled by their lies. In the end, the story was not about revenge alone. It was about reclaiming control, redefining strength, and discovering that even in the darkest, most humiliating moments, the quietest efforts can create the most powerful outcomes. My family had underestimated me, and I had waited, watched, and built my path to triumph in ways they could never imagine. As I closed my eyes that night, I felt the weight of years lifting, replaced by a fierce, shining sense of self. Freedom was mine. With the restitution funds, I made careful choices. I invested in therapy programs, equipment upgrades, and accessibility modifications that gave me independence I had never imagined possible. I took courses in business management and online marketing, skills that allowed me to earn, strategize, and plan a life that was entirely mine. Each achievement, no matter how small, became a milestone of reclamation. Every dollar spent was a reminder. I was no longer a victim, no longer bound by the shadows of my family's lies. I also began writing, at first privately, then publicly. I chronicled my journey, the slow burn revenge of truth against deception, and the liberation that came from patience, strategy, and quiet strength. Messages poured in from people who had endured cruelty, who had been underestimated, who had suffered in silence. My story became a beacon, proof that resilience and careful planning could overturn the heaviest injustices. Each note, each shared post, each comment of encouragement reminded me that the world could see the truth even when family could not. Cassie, of course, remained a presence, but only as a shadow of the past. When I ran into her at events or gatherings, the tension was electric. Her eyes, once cold with superiority, now flickered with uncertainty. I met her gaze calmly, softly, letting silence speak volumes. She had attempted to dominate me for years, and now she had no leverage, no allies, no influence over my life. My quiet composure, my undeniable success, was a victory she could never reclaim. Friends, strangers, even medical professionals began noticing my transformation. Dr. Helena remained a steadfast presence, guiding me not just through recovery, but through empowerment. She reminded me that every small action, every roll down the street, every task performed independently was an act of reclaiming authority over my own body and mind. Her mentorship was invaluable, not because she pitied me, but because she recognized the storm that had always raged quietly within. Months later, I traveled. For the first time since the accident, I experienced a world unshaped by fear and family lies. The beaches, the mountains, the city streets all became a canvas for freedom. People looked at me, sometimes with curiosity, sometimes with admiration, but always with respect I had never known at family events. I had been underestimated, mocked, and restrained, but now I was unstoppable in ways no one had imagined. Even Cassie's attempts to contact me were futile. Emails, messages, phone calls, all ignored. The family that had thrived on my silence and compliance now faced my indifference, and there was immense power in that. She could no longer hurt me, influence me, or intimidate me. I realized that the ultimate revenge was not anger or retaliation. It was living fully, unapologetically, and thriving in the space they had tried to deny me. One night, sitting in my newly renovated apartment, I reflected on everything: the accident, the attack, the betrayal, the humiliation, the painstaking climb toward justice. I realized I had gained more than restitution or public vindication. I had discovered my own resilience, my own power, and my ability to shape my life without apology. I had transformed my pain into strategy, my silence into authority, and my suffering into freedom. Cassie, my parents, even the whispers of judgment, they were all in the past now. I had emerged from the storm stronger, wiser, and unbroken. And as I gazed at the skyline, imagining all the adventures, achievements, and joys yet to come, I knew this truth: nothing could take away the life I had claimed, nothing could diminish the freedom I had fought for, and nothing could ever make me small again. I was no longer Sable, the underestimated, the mocked, the broken. I was Sable, the survivor, the strategist, the unstoppable force of my own destiny. And in that realization, I found the ultimate satisfaction: power reclaimed, life restored, and a future entirely, gloriously my own. The story of Sable ends here. From betrayal, humiliation, and paralysis to quiet strategy, resilience, and ultimate triumph, she has reclaimed her life, her independence, and her identity. Cassie and the family face the consequences of their lies and cruelty, while Sable steps into a future defined by her own strength, freedom, and unstoppable determination.